I'm going to paint this holly leaf for Paul. He wants to do botanical paintings, which is traditionally done on white paper, and I did my first sample on Strathmore something. I'll look it up and list it. I found it had a lot of grain, so this one that I'm going to do is going to be on Stonehenge paper. I'm starting out with green gold. I wanted kind of a dull yellow. I'm using an oval stroke and a sharp point. I do find that using the polychromos, they're very translucent, and as such they take more layers to cover, but they layer so beautifully you can get 6 or 7 layers without even trying. So green gold, I did notice that because of their translucency they don't really cover graphite lines, so I'm using my black Factus eraser to erase them down to next to nothing. Rotate the point often so that you keep a point on it. Otherwise you end up with a flat side. Now normally I would turn the paper, but the video camera does restrict me in that respect. But when you are painting botanicals, I know that they look for really precise edges. And it's very difficult to get a precise edge when you're leading here with the pencil over the background. It is much easier to get a precise edge when the point is pointing at the edge. So keep that in mind, and what I will do is I will just correct it off camera and give myself good sharp edges by turning the paper around, which I really can't do at this point in time. The camera does teach you to be a little versatile. This is olive green yellowish, and I'm just using a touch of it on the points, on some of the points. You don't want to do everything the same on a painting. You want to make some difference, so I wouldn't go around and do all of these points green. And I'm going to blend some out with the yellow again so that they're a little softer. I'm putting a second coat on at the same time here. By going over some of these with yellow, you're changing the value. And value, intensity, and temperature are what makes a painting come alive. I'm coming in with a little touch of ivory here, just to create a value change within that yellow. Value is the lightness or the darkness of something, and it's a a wide value range that makes your painting look interesting. Dark darks, light lights, even on white paper. Maybe a little light touch here. This is ivory. And maybe soften that tip just a little so that they're not all the same value. And again, fight sameness. This is the green yellowish, olive green yellowish. Haven't quite got used to the names yet. And I'll probably never remember the numbers, I'm afraid. But I will list the numbers at the end for you. Some nice blending, 2 layers so that we do have good coverage, and the Stonehenge paper covers beautifully. It has next to no texture and is like painting on satin or silk. It's really beautiful. I'm very partial to Stonehenge, I'm afraid. I'm going to put my light areas in with grey. I use grey to control my colours, the intensity of colours quite a bit. Intensity is the brightness or the dullness of something. Maybe a little touch here. Number 267 was too intense for me, and yet it is very much the color of the holly leaf. So to tone it down just a little bit without changing it, I'm putting it over number 174, which is chromium green opaque. And I'm going over everything with this. You can see it goes nicely over the grey, just giving me a lighter area. Leaves really can be painted with as much interest and detail as flowers. So many people just paint them green, and they're so beautiful in their color differences and their shapes and sizes. There's a lot you can do with a leaf. Remember to rotate your pencil to keep it on point. You notice how I'm changing my pencil direction slightly. I'm kind of going with the growth direction, even though I'm using the circles, which doesn't produce a lot of texture. We still want to keep that growth direction established, just in case any direction does show. Think of it as a clock, a pivot point from up here. So the third thing that makes your painting come alive is temperature. And temperature is relative to what it lies next to. For example, red-violet is cool when it's next to red, but it's warm when it's next to blue. So you have your value, you have intensity, and you have temperature. That's the lightness of the darkness, the brightness of the dullness, and warm or cool. I'm adding another layer now. I find that the polychromos with their translucency usually takes more layers to cover. And I usually go with what comes out of the pencil. Reproduction of color is almost impossible. It doesn't matter whether you're looking at it on a monitor or whether you have a printer. Every monitor will see it differently, so every device, and I have a computer with 2 monitors. I have 2 iPads, I have 2 laptops, and a phone. Every single one of them will display color differently. And it's the same is true with printing. If you have an HP or a Canon or a Xerox printer, they're all going to print out differently. If you take a photo to Staples or Office Depot and they use a different printer, it's going to come out differently. So trying to match something up to a photo is a futile attempt. It's a good guide if you like the photo colors, but use common sense. And when you're trying to reproduce something from a video or a written tutorial, just remember that you can trust the name of the pencil. And that way you learn to look for just values and temperatures. So I'm just putting in another layer here. Trying not to get too directional. Sometimes you have to come across it to counteract direction. I'm coming over this now with pine green, which is really the true color of the holly leaf. And I'm going to focus more on details and smoothing out the layers. This is layer number 3. Keeping that light area by using a little less pressure, just barely tickling the surface over the light area. Again, just over this light area, just barely tickle it. Not going to worry too much about smoothing it out yet because I still have to come in and put some substantial darks in here. And I'm going to shape this center vein a little bit so that it doesn't get too big. It does zero down to next to nothing. I'm going to put my darks in now with dark indigo. And darks make the lights look lighter. You can see how the minute I start to put this in, how this light area starts to pop out now. Nice, clean, sharp edges. And I'd have to put my glasses on to fix that. I usually fix my edges with a magnifying glass when I'm all done. And sometimes I'll use a very thin, Prismacolor very thin pencil to give myself good sharp edges. I'm going to blend this out with a little of the pine green. Sharpen your pencil often. That's layer 4. I'm just blending out these edges. And because that's a little cool, this dark area, I'm going to make it even darker but neutralize it by coming in with some dark sepia. And oil painters know that you make your own black from blue and burnt umber. And that's basically what we're doing here, is making our own warm black by using indigo and dark sepia, a dark brown and a dark blue. And usually the color that's on top will dictate the temperature. So dark sepia with dark indigo on top is a slightly different temperature than the other way around. Come in with our pine green now and finish our layers here, this side. You can see how that light area isn't going anywhere because of that little bit of grey underneath it. And if we need to, we can re-establish it again, and there's several ways to do that. One is to take the Black Factus eraser and erase down a couple of layers so that the white layer shows through. And I'll show you the one I did that one on. And the other thing to do is to just go over it with another layer of grey. And the grey I'm using was Cold Grey 2, number 251. Blending out edges there. Kind of do them as I see them. It is the lights and darks that give your leaf shape and form. If you find you have a heavy touch, you can come back on the shaft of the pencil and hold it further, lay it down flatter. And that way you'll automatically have a lighter touch. So when I want to tickle it, I kind of come further back and lay the pencil down more so that I'm just using the point of the pencil. I'm working on smoothing out layers now. And we don't want that green to show up as a hole in the paper. It's just going to be a lighter green. Sometimes if you have too much direction, blend across it. Put our center stem in with our green gold. We'll come in and tickle some of our edges now. Sorry, had a broken point on that. Using a really dull red because of the green. This is Indian red. When you put complement colors together, they tend to make each other look brighter. And so you need to use a duller red. It'll still show up quite strongly. I'm going to use this olive green yellowish to shade some of these flips a little bit. to make them look a little more curved. Make sure that we don't have a yellow outline over the whole leaf. We don't want that. So I'm just kind of tickling the edges here and there. Maybe make that just, you can see that is much softer, even though I'm using the same color. It's much softer than what I'm using at the tip. And that just creates a little bit of dimension. And all I'm doing now is fighting sameness, making sure that I haven't put a tip on everything. Let's put some darks in here. This is the indigo, the dark indigo. Make this tip look like it's bending back just a little bit. If you want to soften that line just a little bit, you can go over it with the blue, because blue and yellow does make green. Now, a little bit about veins. Leaf veins on the top of a leaf are usually recessed. They're not raised. And when you outline a vein on both sides, you make it look raised. So make sure that you study the leaf that you're painting, and you know whether you're painting the back or the front, and whether the vein is recessed or raised. It does make a difference. This is kind of the fun part, where you get to play a little bit. My dark sepia to just neutralize it. Black and white are the two colors that I rarely use in any painting. White because it's too cool even as a highlight. I would usually use cream or ivory because it's warmer and will come forward. And black because I think it's kind of like a dead color. I'd much rather make my own black or my own darks from any combination of complements. Complements are the opposite colors on the color wheel. This is dark sepia. Anything that is tubular, like a stem, has receding edges on both sides, and they tend to be rounded, and the receding edge is usually a darker value. So now if we want to play with our lights a little bit, we can come in with our grey now. That point needed to be sharper, and I'm just going to cross blend over everything. This also polishes. You'll find that when you burnish with grey, you use a little more pressure. It polishes your painting and takes away a lot of your pencil strokes. Now, I'm a purist. I don't mind pencil strokes showing, but I know a lot of people do. They dissolve it to look like oil painting, but as I'm an oil painter, if I want it to look like oil painting, I'll use oil. So we're just re-establishing our light area a little bit by blending across it, making it a little bit smoother, taking out pencil lines. Nice, soft, smooth blends. Rotate the point often. Might come in with a little ivory up here. Just a little, just to create a different just a touch. A little bit of a highlight down that center stem. And I'm going to soften that stem substantially down here. And sometimes it just doesn't matter what color you pick up. I'm just going over the edges to blur the edges so that it doesn't cut this leaf in half. And just adjusting values a little bit. Now this did have a little tiny cast shadow that I'm going to put in with the cold grey, and that gives it just a little dimension. And then sometimes I'll come in with my scrubby brush and just scrub over everything. Now I don't use a blender and I don't use OMS. It's your choice. If you want to then continue and do either of those, that's fine. I like to blend and smooth with my pencils or my scrubby brush. And this is just a stiff brush with rounded edges. You can see, and I don't clean it very often. So there you have it. I would really like to see some of your finished paintings. Here's the first one that I did on the Strathmore paper, and here's the one I did on the Stonehenge. It's much smoother. It covered more quickly. This leaf was just too big. It took me 2.5 hours to paint this last night, which is why I wanted to keep the size restricted on this one. Here's my Factus black eraser that I use if I find I've got any smudges. I find it does not leave a mark even on white paper. So enjoy. I would love to see some of your leaves when you're all done. I hope you enjoyed this.